Maybe I could begin, well, maybe you should just tell us first, for people who don't know International Institute for Environment and Development, in a nutshell, what it is.
We're a policy research institute based in London, but working with a big network of people around the world on a range of environmental issues, of which climate change, I think, is really our biggest topic.
So, and you're here in force, I understand. There's quite a lot of people here.
We've got a certain number of people from IIED, but we've also got a wonderful network of partner organisations here as well, because for them it's really important to see this extraordinary circus of negotiations and the vast number of side events where 101 different ideas and new initiatives are being discussed.
And maybe we should just say that, that one of the features of these international climate conferences are in fact IIED weekends, where you, environment and development weekends, where you, what is the object of them?
Well, this is the 7th year that we've had this development and adaptation weekend. So that's 2 days of bringing people together to look at how people are already adapting to climate change in different parts of the world and how they might be helped to do it better. What lessons we can start to learn already that can feed into the adaptation part of the global deal that we hope will be signed at Copenhagen next year.
Okay, let's focus on adaptation for a minute then, and don't forget, keep the questions coming and any comments. I wondered if you, since we've just heard from Professor Parry, rather strong warnings actually of 2 billion people with inadequate water, and his argument was that adaptation is taking second place, or there's a danger that it will take second place, and that the focus is on mitigation in trying to stop climate change happening. Do you agree with this analysis?
I have a lot of time for Martin's analysis. I think it's absolutely spot on. I think if you look at the negotiations, what you see is a bunch of big emitters of greenhouse gases. They're the ones who call the shots. They're the ones who've got something to trade in the negotiation process. People who don't have emissions, like many of the least developed countries, they barely emit at all, and so they've got nothing to put into the pot to trade. All they can say is, hey, your actions are causing us considerable damage, and they're going to cause ever larger damage. But because they don't have emissions to negotiate away, like the big countries, their voices are largely unheard.
But mitigation is part of the conference process. So is it that they're not being offered enough by the big powers, as it were, or is it what they're being offered is not going to be particularly helpful?
I think the main problem is that those countries that are going to need to cut their emissions are thinking about the costs of cutting those emissions here and now and over the next few years. What they're failing to look at, though, are the costs that will be borne very often by other countries if those emissions are not cut. And so you've got a sort of imbalance in terms of who needs to cut now versus who's going to be worst affected in years to come.
How exactly does IIED help these small countries?
Well, we try to help really at 2 different levels. First, we do quite a lot of work with the governments of least developed countries and small island states to take the negotiators from those countries through a series of training programs to help them position themselves well in terms of the debates and arguments and topics that are going to be discussed at each conference of the parties. So we do that kind of mixture of legal and institutional training work in advance of the negotiations. At the same time, what we do is we work with a set of non-governmental organisations and researchers in 12 different least developed countries to help them think through how best to learn from what's going on within their own countries and how to feed that into government discussions about how adaptation plans might be developed. So it's a mixture of both government and non-government activity that we attempt to link up so that these countries can be better prepared to address issues of adapting to climate change.
One of the things that strikes me as an observer, and I think a lot of people, is something you've just referred to. There's a lot of research going on. There's a lot of sort of expert opinion being put around. But how does it get to the delegates and into the conference process? I mean, is this something you find frustrating, that there is knowledge and information? You are trying to tip the balance of information power, among other things, but does it really work its way into the conference process, or are these smaller countries permanently disadvantaged?
Well, there are several questions there. Let's take the first one. I think we're all frustrated that many of us outside the negotiation process think that we've got a lot of good experience, ideas, a lot of answers that could help move the negotiations further forward. We had on Saturday an enormous day of people talking about forests and the role that forests can play in terms of climate policy, particularly how one might design a way of paying countries and communities to avoid deforestation, particularly in tropical countries. A wealth of ideas and innovative experience from around the world. My impression is there were probably about 5 delegates there, if that. And in fact, Ivo de Boer, the man who runs the secretariat for the convention, came in for the last half hour of the meeting, and we tried to feed back to him a few very simple, clear ideas that he could take back into the negotiation process. I think the trouble is that if you're a negotiator, you probably need just a few very clear, simple ideas that you can take forward into the discussions. And of course, researchers and NGOs tend to revel in the detail, the fact that, you know, you're dealing with very diverse places, and that you don't want to make simple, hard and fast statements, because in practice you know that the devil of getting a good deal is often in the detail.
Yes, okay. I know it's nice to follow up the questions, and I'm not going to, because I'm giving priority rightly to our second lifers out there. And thanks, you've already prompted several pieces of several requests for information. Here's one. Is there money guaranteed for adaptation yet? That presumably means in the conference process.
There has been a certain amount of money that has already been pledged and spent on adaptation-related activity. That's to say, money set aside for, I think, 38 of the least developed countries to draft national adaptation plans of action. Those plans have now been submitted, but only one of those 38 plans has actually started to be implemented, because money hasn't come in behind them. So money's been spent on drafting these plans, but nobody as yet is putting money into helping make those plans come about. There's also a new adaptation fund that was agreed this time last year that will be replenished by a 2% tax on the clean development mechanism, which is this carbon finance mechanism under the terms of the Kyoto Protocol. So that generates a certain amount of money that will go into the adaptation fund. However, the fund isn't operating as yet, because there's some legal issues that need to be got through before it can become fully operational.